What was a time in which a date was going well, but the other person ruined it? Story 1. She told me she had pretty bad anxiety being in public and asked if she could make me dinner instead. We went for a walk prior to the dinner so we could see if we wanted to do the dinner after. She was super stoked for dinner after our walk. Dinner was great and she asked if I wanted to watch a movie. About 20 minutes into the movie she started nudging into me and initiated making out. After starting to really get into the heavier side of things, I felt something tap my shoulder. I am on top of her at this point. I turned my head quickly as it startled me and I am met eye-to-eye with a 4 to 5 year old boy who then asks me if he can have a cup of water. His mom starts screaming at him to go back to his room, which he runs as fast as he can back to. She starts apologizing and tries to reinitiate it. I told her to give me a minute. Got a cup of water and called for him to come back out, which he did. I handed him the cup. He took a drink and said thank you and ran back into his room. I was pretty riled up at the idea she had her kid there without saying anything and screamed at him for asking for something so basic as water. I left after that and vowed to never be that parent with my own kids. Story 2. I was out with a guy having a lovely time and he made a comment about a copper bangle bracelet I was wearing. I told him that it was really special to me. I got it during my semester abroad in South Africa from a local. It was a solid copper band, but in the middle there was copper wire woven around. He asked to take a closer look, so I took it off and handed it to him. He then snapped it in half, thinking the copper wire was a spring. I was visibly upset and he said that it was a sign that I needed to move on from my trip and stop living in the past. I never spoke to him again. Story 3. Happened twice with two different dudes. 1. I met off a site. He was nice, if a little awkward, and he couldn't help but show me his Twitch stream gameplays for 25 minutes straight, watching me expectantly. Which might have been okay for a conversation starter actually. I love gaming, but there's only so much of watching someone else's stream with no funny commentary or context one can handle before mentally checking out. Second was a guy who we had some playful banter before our date and he asked me about my kinks, so I told him I liked being choked. When we met up in the parking lot, dude immediately puts me in a WWE chokehold in broad daylight, presumably thinking my panties were gonna drop right then and there. I can assure you, they did not. Story 4. I had a really sweet guy take me on one of those we're both poor college kids dates where you do a bunch of free stuff around something cheap. We bought some grocery store sushi and went out to a park to eat it and talk with each other on the swing set there. From there we went back to his off-campus house and had a more adorable getting-to-know-you conversation. He was ridiculously charming in a sweet sort of awkward way, and I was vibing, so we go up to his bedroom and proceeded to get started on the intimacy portion of the evening. He removes my pants and basically lifts me onto a mid-height dresser of his. This is a good move, fellas, just FYI, to make out. He then reached into his pocket to pull out what I imagined was going to be a condom or something, but instead he flicked open a massive knife and began tracing the inside of my thigh without a single stitch of warning. This is not a good move, fellas. I flipped my shit and ran out of there with him trailing me, trying to explain how he thought I might enjoy that. Like, my dudes, your dates/partners/hookups might be hella kinky or super into doing a lot of wild shit if you mention it first. I might have been down, honestly, but there's nothing sexy about performing the beginning of the "oh no, it appears you've met a serial killer" scene with no warning. Yikes. Edit. I also had a first date turn into being stranded in the guy's house for a week, which involved me answering the door for animal control, a truck repo guy, and the police serving foreclosure papers the first morning after. Notably, when I told him his truck was being repossessed, partly why I ended up stranded, he told me to get my corn CD out of there before they take it, and some of the wine boxes too, but that's a way longer story, so there's that. Story 5. Went bowling with a guy and a couple friends. We were getting along pretty well, but when we were sitting together on my friend's turn to bowl, he put his hand on my thigh. I wasn't into physical affection from people I don't know well and wasn't comfortable with him yet, so I politely and subtly scooched his hand away so as to not bring attention to it and embarrass him. That in itself wasn't an issue because he shot his shot, why not? My problem became when he put his hand back and gripped my leg assertively. I wasn't having it and figured he just didn't get the hint, so I picked up his hand and moved it back to his own lap. He shot a look at me and then dove his hand into my inner thigh, the part you touch to initiate something you know, and I grabbed his wrist and pulled his hand out and looked over at him with the most definitive NO on my face I could. We did not go out again. If a man can't respect my physical boundaries in public, he sure as hell won't respect them in private. Story 6. Not me, but my sister. One time she was on a first date, and she liked the guy, he was checking off all the right boxes, and then he just blurted out, "My dick is so big, it needs its own zip code." Then it proceeded to go downhill from there, how many times a day he could ejaculate, etc. She was horrified. Story 7. Not me, but a female friend of mine was just telling me about her most recent OkCupid date. Her description went something like this. Everything was going really great. He is smart and funny, and easy to talk to. He seems like a great dad to his kids and gets along okay with his ex, always a good sign. Just a really down-to-earth guy, and it seemed like there was some nice chemistry. After dinner we decided to go have a drink at a fun little bar about a mile away. We got in his car to drive over there. He kissed me, which was nice. Then he took out his penis. Story 8. I went on a blind date with someone who had just gotten out of a bad relationship. When she first showed up she looked really rattled. Beautiful, but rattled. Asked if she was okay and she said she was fine. A tall guy passed too close by her chair and she practically jumped out of her skin. Finally admitted she had been dating her cousin. Yes, her cousin. They were really into each other, but she finally called it off because she knew it was wrong. He wasn't happy, it didn't seem like she was either. It was a shame because she was gorgeous, but her mind was a million miles away the whole time. I went to drop her off in front of her apartment complex and there was a tall, good-looking guy leaning against a car out front. She gasped and said, "That's him." I asked if she'd be okay or if she wanted me to walk her in or take her somewhere else. She said she was fine, but I might want to leave ASAP. She then proceeded to practically leap into his arms as he strode towards us. As I drove off I saw her get into his Tesla. Story 9. I asked out a Korean exchange student my first week of college. I had never actually did the full forward you want to go out thing before, and she was gorgeous, way out of my league. My jaw dropped when she accepted. 2 days later I picked her up at her dorm in my fairly new Mustang. She seemed quiet, and I thought it was just shyness. We're on the highway doing 55 when she suddenly rolled down the window and vomited all over the outside of the CR. Like, a lot. I think she ate a gallon of vegetable soup before the date or something. I took her back to her dorm, she ran out of the car and I was left to clean things up. I took the car to a car wash and it actually faded the paint. This was before cell phones, so I tried finding her to talk to her after that. I never saw her again. That was back in 1990, and to this day I have no idea what happened. Story 10. Not me but a friend of mine. This was when we were around 22, 23 years old. She had a first date with a guy. They were meeting at a restaurant for dinner. She gets there and sees not only him but 2 other people at the table. Turns out he invited his parents to their date. So she, of course, excused herself to go to the bathroom and then just bounced. Talk about awkward. I have never laughed so hard as when she recounted her evening. This reminds me of a girl I liked at university. She was in a choir and was selling tickets to a recital, so I bought 2. She asked me who the other one was for, and I answered honestly, not thinking too much of it, because I am an idiot, I guess my mother. On the day of the event we sat and listened to her sing with the choir, then at the intermission I went by myself to find her, but she was nowhere to be seen. It turned out that she thought I was bringing my mother to meet her, so she feigned illness and hid. What actually happened was that the accompanying string quartet featured none other than my cousin, and my mother wanted to hear her play. If the girl was watching from her hiding place, then she likely would have seen us chatting to the cellist, with no idea what was going on. Story 11. I had some odd dates after I got divorced and was trying to meet new people. So when meeting someone for the first time, I would always invite them to do something kind of non-committal like getting coffee so I could end things early and leave if they get weird. The girl shows up and has her 2 young children with her that I didn't know about. That wasn't a problem for me, and she was super nice, so we talked for about 20 minutes outside the coffee shop, and I suggested we do something more kid-friendly like getting ice cream, and everyone loved the idea. So we Googled a nearby place and went there instead. The kids were happy and we had some really good conversation for about an hour. I asked if she would be interested in dinner and she said yes, but it would have to be several hours later and she might still have the kids. Her sitter had bailed last minute. We met later that night and she had the kids again and we ate at a low-end steakhouse. We got along great and the conversation was good. But she got sloppy drunk off the 3 drinks she ordered with dinner and then drove her kids home after. I did offer to pay for her to get a ride home, and that just killed any interest I had. Story 12. Not me, but a date I witnessed working at a restaurant. This young guy and a girl showed up, they're chatting, laughing, and seemed to be having a good time. Then he got very clearly drunk and started blatantly hitting on me right in front of her. Every time I walked by the table he called me over, calling me Scarlett Johansson, and tried starting a conversation. I wasn't even their waitress. The poor girl was literally sinking down in her seat looking miserable. I stopped trying to be polite, ignored him, and gave her looks, trying with all my might to psychically tell her get out. Story 13. I went on a date with a guy who owned a local trendy business. It kind of made him a bit of a local celebrity. I am an introvert, I don't like attention and prefer to pretend that I am invisible when out in public. We were on our second date at a restaurant, not super fancy but certainly a little romantic date type place. During our dinner, no less than 5 randoms stopped by our table to talk to him. They were all customers and he was trying to balance being an attentive date without totally alienating customers. It was super awkward. He was aware that I was an introvert and was apologetic about it. He suggested that we wrap up dinner, hit up a store to grab some drinks and dessert, and go to the beach, a good way to be around less people. In the shop we stopped at, 2 more people came up to him to chat, and then, at the beach, another person stopped, and this one actually tried to sit down and join us. At this point, I decided this guy wasn't for me. I really liked him as a person, but I couldn't deal with all the attention he attracted. Somehow he convinced me to go on a 3rd date, which I am glad he did. It's been 20+ years that we've been together. He's helped me come out of my shell a little, and I've taught him the delights of being an introvert and taking some completely people-free weekends. He is my person and I love him more than anything. Edit, thank you for the gold and the kind comments below. It's a nice reminder how lucky I am that I didn't ditch him after that date. Story 14. Sore loser and farted in a diner. Went out with some guy who used to come in all the time to the game store I worked at. We were flirty, and when it was slow in the store, we'd play DS in a spot that was blind to the camera. One day, he suggested we play Mario Kart. I hadn't played the DS version yet but had played the N64 one to bits, so I said sure. I totally destroyed this guy. I mean win after win after win. He was sweaty and frustrated, and because I was a dumb 19-year-old, I felt bad for him. I let him win a round and he tried rubbing it in my face for 5 minutes about how great he was and how it was a fluke I beat him since he had been playing all week. So again, me being dumb, I decided to keep talking with this guy and went out with him to a diner for some late-night tea/coffee. Things went okay actually, and he was much better behaved for most of the date, until he demanded a Mario Kart rematch. I declined and said I'd rather get to know each other. He got annoyed and mockingly asked what we should talk about, then kept nagging for a rematch again. Again, I declined. Suddenly he got a mischievous look on his face. I have to fart, he laughed. Oh, I said, throwing him a disgusted look. Think I should? I think everyone in here would hear you. He suddenly leaned to the side and angled his butt cheeks perfectly against the vinyl seat, his enormous fart erupting out and around and causing the already quiet diner to go completely silent as everyone turned to look at him. I told him goodnight and he tried to argue all the way out to my car, but I left and he stopped coming into the game store. Listen, farts are funny, but like all comedy, it's about time and place. Yuck. Welcome to the end of another Thread Tales episode. Join us again for more captivating Ask Reddit stories that bring us closer through shared experiences.